Welcome to LinesToGo installation videos. Today we will be removing and installing transmission cooler lines on a 2005 Dodge Ram 2500 using LinesToGo part number TCL-142. While this particular installation is being performed on a 2005 Dodge Ram 2500, this set of lines will also fit the following year, make, and models as shown on your screen now. LinesToGo lines are made using original equipment end forms and fittings that are CNC bent for an easy and precise installation. We have also upgraded to stainless steel braided Teflon hoses for rust protection and to prevent surface fouling. These have an unlimited shelf life and anti-static PTFE liner. This set of LinesToGo lines are made from G2 Galfan coated steel tubing for rust resistance that exceeds OEM standards. Tech tip: disconnect the battery before working on a vehicle to reduce the risk of shorting out the battery on tools or lines. LinesToGo lines are made with a sectional design for easier installation. We also use color-coded unions on our sectioned lines. Just match the colors at the connections. Tools required: 10mm 12-point, 13mm, 19mm, and 22mm wrenches, 8mm, 10mm 12-point, 11mm and 24mm sockets and ratchet, flat blade screwdriver, LinesToGo disconnect tool part number 3145-01, drain pan, jack and jack stands. The level of difficulty for this installation is considered to be easy. Start by disconnecting both negative battery terminals using a 13mm wrench. Next, use a 10mm socket to remove the bolt that secures the engine oil dipstick to the intake air tube, along with the 4 bolts that secure the intake air tube to the engine. Use an 11mm socket to loosen the clamp that secures the upper and lower intake air tube. Remove the top intake air tube from the vehicle. At the driver's side front of the vehicle, use an 11mm socket to loosen the clamp that secures the intake air tube to the intercooler. Remove the lower intake air tube from the vehicle. Raise and support the vehicle and use a 24mm socket to remove the left front wheel from the vehicle. Support the vehicle at the frame so the front suspension is unloaded to allow more room to route lines. Use an 8mm socket to remove the screws that secure the left front mud flap and remove it from the vehicle. Use an 8mm socket to remove the screws that secure the left front inner fender. Remove the left front inner fender from the vehicle. Use a 10mm socket or wrench to remove the bolt at the top of the windshield washer fluid reservoir. Use a 13mm wrench to remove the other bolt that secures the washer fluid reservoir located beside the intercooler connection. To save any existing washer fluid, have a container ready and remove the hose at the washer fluid pump and position a container to catch the fluid. Disconnect the 2 electrical connectors on the reservoir. Near the top of the reservoir, remove the furthest forward electrical connector from the fuse box by unclipping the plastic lever to remove it. Remove the windshield washer fluid reservoir from the vehicle. Use the LinesToGo disconnect tool, part number 3145-01, to disconnect the pressure line quick connect fitting at the front transmission cooler connection. Use two 22mm wrenches to remove the threaded connection at the front of the return line. Use a 22mm wrench to remove the two threaded transmission cooler fittings from the auxiliary cooler, located on the driver's side of the engine. Remove the front return line from the vehicle. Use a 19mm wrench to remove the two threaded transmission cooler fittings from the transmission. Remove the plastic clips from the transmission lines. Remove the rear section of the return line from the vehicle. In order to have room to route the pressure line in and out of the vehicle, the starter will have to be repositioned. Use a 10mm 12-point socket or wrench to remove the 3 bolts that secure the starter into place. One of the bolts is located on top of the starter. Remove the starter and let it rest on the front differential. Remove the pressure line from the vehicle. To begin the installation of your new LinesToGo transmission cooler lines, start by installing the pressure line labeled 142A into position. Replace the starter back into position and secure the 3 bolts using a 10mm 12-point socket or wrench. Start the rear threaded fitting at the transmission and tighten using a 19mm wrench. Note, while tightening this fitting, hold the line up close to the transmission so that it is in the correct orientation once it is tight. Connect the front quick connect fitting, making sure it is fully seated. Next, install the rear LinesToGo return line labeled 142B into position. Start the front fitting into the bottom port in the auxiliary cooler and the rear fitting into the front port in the transmission. Tighten the front threaded fitting using a 22mm wrench and the rear fitting using a 19mm wrench. Make sure to hold the line close to the previous line while tightening. Failure to do so could result in the drive shaft coming into contact with the line when the suspension is fully compressed. Replace the plastic clip that secures the 2 lines together at the rear. Next, install the front LinesToGo return line labeled 142C into position. Start the rear threaded fitting into the top port in the auxiliary cooler and tighten using a 22mm wrench. Start the front threaded fitting into the remaining section of rubber hose and tighten the connection using two 22mm wrenches. Secure the front lines using the plastic clip removed earlier. Next, replace the windshield washer fluid reservoir back into position. Replace the two electrical connectors at the bottom of the reservoir along with the hose on the washer fluid pump. Replace the electrical connector in the bottom of the fuse box and secure it using the plastic locking arm. Replace the lower bolt on the reservoir and secure it using a 13mm wrench. Replace the bolt at the top of the reservoir and secure it using a 10mm socket or wrench. If you have saved any washer fluid, pour it back into the reservoir. Replace the left front inner fender and secure it using an 8mm socket to replace all of the screws. Replace the mud flap using an 8mm socket to replace the screws. Replace the left front wheel and torque to your manufacturer's recommended specifications using a 24mm socket and lower the vehicle. Install the lower intake air tube into position and start it onto the outlet of the intercooler. Install the upper intake air tube into the lower tube and secure it onto the engine using a 10mm socket to tighten the 4 bolts going into the intake, along with the bolt that secures the engine oil dipstick. Use an 11mm socket to tighten the 2 clamps in the lower intake air tube. Reconnect both batteries using a 13mm wrench. With the vehicle sitting on a flat level surface, chalk the wheels and let the vehicle run in neutral. Check the transmission fluid level and top it up as required. This completes the installation of transmission cooler lines on a 2005 Dodge Ram 2500 using LinesToGo part number TCL-142. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or would like to purchase the lines you saw today, please call us at 1-855-781-5992. Email us at info@linestogo.com or check out our website link below. And don't forget to take advantage of our free 2-day shipping. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below, and we will see you on our next video.